The Brexit Secretary is in the studio with me. Good to see you, Mr.
Good morning.
Davis. And as I always say, as chipper as ever. But I'm sure you or your team have had sight of the Times and other newspapers. Ireland warns May over Brexit row after Minister casts doubt on border agreement. You, Mr. Davis, are accused of backing away from an agreement on border arrangements between Northern Ireland and the Republic just 2 days after it was done.
Well,
David Davis.
I've never seen a more convoluted piece in a newspaper. What I actually said yesterday, in terms, was we want to protect the peace process, want to protect Ireland from the impact of Brexit for them. And I said this was a statement of intent which was much more than just legally enforceable. In other words, it would apply. Of course, it's legally enforceable under the withdrawal agreement, but even if that didn't happen for some reason, for something went wrong, we would still be seeking to provide a frictionless, invisible border with Ireland. So no, they've completely twisted my words, I'm afraid.
So it goes ahead regardless.
No, what we're saying is this bit of it, the bit about the full alignment argument on the issues which affect the peace process and the Belfast Agreement. We would look to that anyway, because one of our absolute underpinning aims is to ensure that Ireland, and particularly the Northern Ireland peace process, is not harmed. And what's most symbolic in that is the absence of a hard border, the absence of border posts and that sort of thing. And we are quite certain we can do that by technical and other means, even if we end up without a deal with the European Union. But
yesterday you said this was a statement of intent more than anything else, much more a statement of intent than it was illegally enforceable.
No, I said much more than legally enforceable. That's a slight, in that case it sounds like a slight misquote. But look, it's very plain.
But they say much more a statement of intent than it was a legally enforceable thing. It is a legally
enforceable. Of course it's legally enforceable.
Right. So why would you have said it was a statement of intent?
Because it's more than legally enforceable. In the event that the withdrawal agreement doesn't happen, then we would still be seeking to maintain an invisible border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. That was the point. I was making the point it was much more than just in the treaty. It's what we want to do anyway.
And in practical terms, have you and your team worked out how you're actually going to have this frictionless border? What cameras, or what's going to be?
All sorts of possibilities. The biggest one for large quantities of trade is what they call an authorised economic operator, or a trusted trader. So if let's say you are sending large quantities of diesel or some other product across.
Well, milk seems to be going across there all the time, doesn't it?
Milk's a more problematic one. I'll come back to milk in a second. Right. But you're sending large quantities across border. You basically notify the customs when you do it. They audit your warehouse every so often, and you have what's called a trusted trader scheme. We have these already, but on a quite low scale. We're going to increase that dramatically. You'll do other things like tracking back from the border. Those sorts of things as well. Electronic pre-notifications, another thing we can do. So there's quite a lot of that. The areas where there's difficulties are smaller businesses, and as you say, milk may be going from a farm to a dairy and then back and so on. And that's more difficult, but we have ideas for that too, including things like waivers and small business schemes and so on. So we're quite clear in our mind we can do this, and that's what we intend to do.
So those who are getting in a flap, and we'll move on from Northern Ireland in a moment, those who are getting in a flap over the border, you're confident that all the issues can be addressed?
And indeed, Leo Varadkar's office, the Taoiseach's office yesterday, said we have no reason to think that the British government will do anything other than uphold their end of the deal, which is what they said.
What happens for European citizens who come in once we have Brexited? They come in through Dublin or wherever it is, then they get over the border, they're then into the United Kingdom, they then can make their way here to the UK. So isn't that going to be possible for people being smuggled or whatever, people smuggled and traffickers?
That would be a very hard way to get into Britain.
It would.
You'd have to be a fairly dumb people smuggler to come that way. Something like 50 million people go through the country every year, and tourists and so on. You go to Heathrow, look at it. There's huge numbers of people. It's much simpler to come in and pretend you're a tourist than it is to take a sort of elliptical route like that.
So you don't see that as a problem?
No, we will have talks to the Irish government about how we handle it, but we've got quite confident we can handle it too.
And how, in practical terms, would you handle that?
Well, in terms of talking to them about their own security data, because they measure who comes into their country, for their own reasons. They don't want to have illegal immigrants either. So they will have, and we'll talk to them about sharing that sort of data.
The divorce bill is £39 billion.
The estimate's 35, 39. Yes.
35, 39. What did they initially want?
Well, then, and the numbers on the front page of the FT were 100 billion. I'm tempted to say I wish I was on a commission, but yes, the original numbers were something of the order of 100 billion.
Is that what they first started with?
No, they didn't give us a number. They just gave lots and lots of claims, and said, and by the way, you can't have your assets either. You know, so and what we did is we went through line by line, every single line, and said, okay, you know, we accept we got commitments. You know, we were, you know, these decisions were made while we were members of the club, as it were, and we went through line by line. You may remember there was a rather tetchy end of negotiating round press conference about 3 back, when everybody thought it was all falling to bits. That was the week that we'd gone through line by line. It was quite a difficult week.
Right.
But then we've been through line by line, and it's brought it back to a much more. It's less than 4 years' contribution.
And we pay the divorce bill if we have no deal?
No, what I've made very plain is that this whole withdrawal agreement is dependent upon the
The Chancellor was wrong there, then.
Yeah, I'm afraid that the Chancellor slightly misspoke. But you know, this is dependent. It says in the. It's quite
a big thing to be wrong about, Mr. Davis.
No. I mean, it says at the beginning. It says at the beginning of the thing, nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. It's a classical European Union thing. They put it in every treaty. They put it there, not us. So it's about paragraph 5, I think. and nothing. And so, well, fair enough. Nothing's agreed till everything's agreed. Until we've got the whole deal sorted out, then.
Surely the Chancellor should have been aware of this.
Well, you have to ask him. I mean, I
don't see me as often as you do.
I don't know what the context of the question was. I really don't.
But he was wrong on that anyway.
The straightforward fact is this whole payment is contingent upon deal concluding.
You talk about, I think it was a Canada Plus Plus, or it might have been a Canada
Plus.
Okay, so it's a Canada
Plus. 4 pluses, I think.
It took them 7 years to do that deal, didn't it?
Yeah.
We haven't got time to do that with each other.
But we're already at this is where this full alignment stuff comes in. We're already at the point where all of our standards, our product standards, our employment, they're all the same as the European Union. Normally speaking, there are a couple of things that take a long time to take effect in a trade deal. One is negotiating the new standards. We don't have to do that. They're already there. The second thing is actually bringing into effect the new standards. You know, one country or other or both has to change the way they make things, change the way they do things. Neither of those things are necessary. Countries like Chile have struck these deals in less than a year. And we know precisely what our trade pattern is. We know what we have to focus on. You know, we have to sort out aviation, we have to sort out nuclear, we have to sort out data. But overarching, we don't want any tariffs. We haven't got them now. Why should we have them in the future?
Okay. Nick Clegg, who I'm sure you will concede is fairly close to Europe, has suggested that suggested EU leaders want to offer Mrs May a deal to control immigration and therefore to halt Brexit. Your response to Mr Clegg's initiative?
Well, we won't be doing that. I mean, the whole point about bringing back control, not the whole point, but one point was to control immigration, to bring it under, not to stop it, not to say you're not going to have anybody else anymore, not pull up the drawbridge, but actually make it a manageable level so things like housing and jobs and so on are properly balanced, and that's what we intend to do. And now we may talk to them about what sort of immigration policy we're going to have, but free movement's coming to an end.
The period of transition, how long do you understand that to be?
We think about 2 years. We think about 2 years.
Are they happy with 2 years?
They seem to be reasonably happy. They've talked about 21 months.
So why that? That's a weird
one.
Well,
because it brings it to the end of the financial...
Oh, I see.
The 5-year or the sort of 7-year financial round, you know, which ends at Christmas basically, rather than Easter, and so that's essentially the range we're in. And actually, if we wanted longer than that, I mean, firstly, I don't think we need longer than that. But secondly, you'd start to get into questions about: is this a new trade treaty? Should we put up? Should we ask the Walloon Parliament what they think about it? All those sorts of things. You know, you don't want to do that.
And we still abide by EU law during the transition.
Yeah, broadly through that time, we'll abide by EU law, EU regulations, and so on. It just gives us time to bring into effect the treaty that we will have struck. You know,
when it all came to an end on Friday morning, did you allow yourself a glass of champagne?
I didn't actually. I'm told there was champagne at the breakfast. I didn't see it. You probably don't know. I can't drink orange juice. It's poison to me. It's my sort of kryptonite.
Is that That's why
I sat there with this glass of orange juice in front of me and nothing to drink, except these incredibly strong coffees they serve.
Oh yeah, they're very strong. Yeah.
But there we are. That kept me awake anyway. Given I've been up since 3, it was all right.
And you'd been there all night, and the Prime Minister had been with you all night?
No. We went out in the middle of the night, basically. We went out very early morning, and that was because there were other things. Bear in mind, we started on Monday.
Yes.
And
was that as calamitous as it appeared in some quarters of the media? It did look like a very dark day, Mr. Davis.
Well, no, not really. I mean,
respectfully, the Prime Minister get a phone call halfway through lunch.
Yeah, I know. But I listened to it, and it was quite a lot shorter than people say as well. But what's the requirement of my job? I mean, I don't have to be very clever. I don't have to know that much. I do just have to be calm. And that did test the calmness a bit.
Did it? Yeah,
a little bit. But so we had to pick another day, and we looked at Wednesday, but Wednesday wasn't long enough for the DUP to sort themselves out, so we made it Thursday or Friday morning.
How are relations between Mrs May and Arlene Foster now?
Okay. Look, I mean, they made I mean, I think they were worried about the interpretation being put on the full alignment by some Irish media, and that's understandable. Also true of some of our own backbenchers. So that's perfectly reasonable. This is a negotiation. We've got to get to a point where everybody is at least reasonably comfortable. Nobody's perfectly happy. I mean, you won't find many commissioners leaping down the street in Brussels whistling to themselves, but they're reasonably happy, and our side's reasonably happy too.
What's the trickiest part of where the negotiations are to date? What has the trickiest part been, would you say?
Well, it's moved actually. That's an interesting point, because in the beginning it was citizens' rights, but we were very, very enthusiastic about getting citizens' rights right. So quite quickly it then shifted over to money. Money was a long, sort of fairly arduous thing, as I've just described to you, and then at the very last minute, we thought we'd sorted the Irish government's issues, and the Irish government came back in about 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, and that came to the top of the tree. So all 3 issues spent some time at the top of the tree. All 3 big issues. The longest, I suppose, was money. But nobody's surprised at that.
And with the benefit of hindsight, do you wish you hadn't used the expression impact statements?
Well, in the last 18 months, I've talked about impact here and there, but an impact statement. This is the thing that the Labour Party have been going on about. The impact statement is it's got a proper meaning in Whitehall. There's a definition of it and so on, including things like forecasts. Now, I don't actually believe economic forecasts. They've all been proven wrong. I mean, look at all the ones about Brexit. So what we do is we look at what we call a sectoral analysis, which is the size of the thing, the size of the industry, the employment levels, how much is dependent on Europe, how much is dependent on European regulations, how much opportunity there is in other countries. When you know those things, you know what you need to know.
Yeah, but you did make it sound as if there were vast dossiers.
Well, there are vast dossiers, but they're sectoral analyses. They're not forecasts. That's the point. Impact statements are rather it's a sort of a term of art. They're not forecasts. They're not sort of forecasts of what will happen in the different circumstances, because those forecasts are always wrong, as we've seen with Brexit.
Well, yes. Just coming to our last couple of minutes, you said. I mean, it is fair that you say that all the Brexit forecasts wrong. Prices have gone up. Growth has slowed down. Many think that's as a result of Brexit.
Prices have gone up. What?
In the shops?
3% inflation.
Well, 8% of Christmas products. It says today.
Well, I don't know.
I haven't bought my Christmas pudding yet.
Me neither. Christmas Eve is a time I do my Christmas shopping. But I think when you say growth slowed down, we were told that growth would go into reverse. I mean, we've got the highest number of people employed in this country we've ever had, ever. Yes. We've had the lowest unemployment in my adult life.
Growth has slowed as opposed to parts of Europe.
Well, growth in the rest of Europe slowed down a hell of a lot more in that.
But now it's picking up.
Now it's picking up a bit. Yeah. So these things bounce around. Okay. You can't really attribute that to Brexit. You attribute to Brexit the fact that Apple have come here, that Facebook have come here, that SoftBank's invested billions here.
Okay.
That I could stand here all day and go on about what's happened.
So what happens next then? As regards to this, we move on to what?
Well, what happens next? First, you got the council on Thursday, and then that'll hopefully put the imprimatur on this deal. We'll then be ready for early in the new year for two things: one, the negotiation implementation period, and two, the implementation of the future agreement. And bear in mind, it's not just trade. We talk about trade a lot, but actually it's trade, but it's also security, counter-terrorism, foreign affairs, and so on. So we're going to be looking for treaties on all fronts.
You've hinted you might retire in 2019. You can't go until this is done, can you?
Well, I suspect I'm shackled to the mast, but there we are.
So if the transition period is longer,
unless they decide I'm no bloody good at it, in that case they'll sack me.
But if the transition period is longer, you're going to have to stay.
No. We want the substantive negotiation concluded before the transition period starts. I mean, there might be details to be sorted, but the main deal has got to be struck by.
But the details would fall to you, no?
Oh, anybody can do details. Well, we'll let you do the details.
I think the country's and the cabinet all happy, playing like Manchester City, are you?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
All is one. All is one.
All is one. All happy.
We will make America great again.